Alrighty. Well, speaking of Texas A&M, look, Drew, I know this is why you get up in the morning. All right. And we're happy to have you on the show for your analysis of the Texas A&M versus Notre Dame football game, where the line is A&M -3 in most places. Look, on the show a while back, or on Twitter, well, on a show a while back, we told you about taking that +1, but then on Twitter, we also put out, hey, get it at -1 before it moves. And what do you know? Charles Jagsaw gets hurt. Well, this is after Charles Jagsaw got hurt at left tackle. The line moved significantly. Drew, I know I watched your prediction for the Notre Dame game, so I already know what you're going to say. So I'm not going to spoil anything, but give it to us, man. What do we
Yeah.
like about these teams?
All right. So obviously you got to look at the one matchup that A&M's looking to exploit. It starts with the defensive line of A&M going up against a very raw and untested Notre Dame offensive line. That's the one major discrepancy in this game, in my opinion, that where you look at two position groups and you say, okay, this team can exploit that totally. However, if you talk to Notre Dame fans and you look at their defense, that defense could shut A&M's offense down. There's a world where that happens. So if you're going to pick A&M in this game, you're banking on Connor Wegman going back to form in game one under a new staff. You're banking on an offensive line who hasn't shown that they've played at like that average to above average level in 2 years. You're banking on a receiver room that lost its two top dogs. You're banking on a lot to come true. But you're also very happy with the fact they have a totally new offensive scheme, a new coaching staff. Things got stale. Things were bad under the previous staff. It's a year one, but you're still looking at it as a potential net positive for A&M, just given a better offensive scheme with a more diverse running attack under Colin Klein, getting a more of a gap block heavy scheme, running at some of these Notre Dame monsters on the defensive line. It's all around improvement you're kind of banking on for A&M's offense if A&M is going to outscore Notre Dame. Now, here's the thing. I'm not fully sold on Notre Dame's offense overall. I'm not fully sold on Riley Leonard. I'm not fully sold on this entire receiver group. I know they have a couple guys, but I'm not sure that they're going to be able to score on A&M's defense. So I think you could say that exact same dialogue. You could copy paste that from Notre Dame. So that being said, this is an underplay, and it's moved down like 2.5 points, 3 points. It was what started at 49 is where it opened. Is that what it was? Something
Oh,
like
yeah.
that?
And I did not jump on it, unfortunately.
Oh,
But
no.
right now, you're looking at 46.5. No, it opened at 50.5, Drew.
Oh, my
That's what it opened
goodness.
at. It's been,
What were we doing? What
it's
were we
crossed.
doing?
I was caught sleeping,
Me
Drew.
too, man. Me
It's
too. I
crossed like
regret it.
three key numbers. So, or two,
And
I
I'm
guess.
still favoring the under right now. Not to get into spoilers, but I'm still favoring the under in this game. And if you've seen my video, you know I have A&M winning this. I actually have them winning by 10 or 11. I have a big win. I have 28-17 Texas A&M. And I think that's by way of this A&M defensive line creating enough havoc to create at least one scoring opportunity for the offense or scoring themselves. I'm not sold on the Notre Dame offense overall yet. I know they brought in Mike Denbrock. I know they feel really good about that. But can they do the Mike Denbrock thing? Can they go one tight end the whole game against this defensive line? Do they need to bring in tight end help off the bench? Do they have to slow down? Can they air it out against this defensive line? I don't know. I don't know if they can. I mean, the best offensive coordinators will adapt, but that's not what we've seen from Denbrock the last few years. So I don't know if they can play to their strengths. I think A&M takes them out of their game, and I think the defense gives A&M an extra bump, and A&M covers and wins.
Wow.
That's stuff I love to
I-
hear, Drew.
Thank you. Thank you. Listen, I as the A&M outsider here, to me, I look at because I kind of like A&M in the passing defense, right? Because I love their pass rushers. I love what their matchup, obviously, the offensive line, like you talked about. And I like their secondary. You guys did a whole video on that. I encourage you to check that out because there's a lot of pieces you can move around, even though it's going to be in a new system and new faces and new uniform for a lot of these guys coming in and transfer. But there's so much talent there, different bodies, what you can do. To me, I worry about if I see a path to victory for Notre Dame here, it's going to be running the football, not only with Jeremiah Love, but also Riley Leonard, what he can do, adding that extra dimension when he is healthy. We saw him break Clemson at times in week one last year, and that was a really talented front there for Clemson. My question here for A&M, and I want you guys to answer it and answer honestly, I guess, do you feel good about what they can do early down, up the middle in terms of obviously, you get the third down, you feel really good about unleashing Gordon, Stewart, Turner, all those guys to rush the passer. But up the middle, not only at that linebacker 2 spot, but also in that interior defensive line, is that something I should be worried about here? Is there an advantage for Notre Dame?
Well, it's not like Notre Dame has a significant offensive line advantage. I think there's a question about who is going to play that one tech. I mean, A&M, there was a depth chart that was like today, and there's like oars at like, basically every position that we were already previously asking a question about. Like, I still think there's a question like, is Albert Regis going to be a guy that steps up and, plug up holes in that one tech? Is DJ Hicks going to actually play one tech? Like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to those things. I do think you have a really good athletic set of linebackers opposite Torian York. I do think they're not as good as Ezra and Cooper, but I do think that they can impact the run game, but also too, those edge rushers, well, Shamar Turner, first of all, is a good run defender, but he'll be playing 3 tech likely, unless he plays one tech. I don't know. I don't know what that interior is going to look like. I'm confident that they can do enough to stop the run, if that makes sense. I don't think Notre Dame's offensive line, even their interior offensive line, has a significant advantage over A&M's interior defensive line. And I'm sure, Drew, you may agree, have other counterpoints.
No, I agree that is actually a question. That's a question mark on the team. I think the most significant loss on the team is McKinley Jackson to the NFL, because you don't fill it 1-for-1. I mean, you don't really replace Edger and Cooper, but you feel good about that room and the depth behind whoever starts. You don't replace McKinley Jackson. Yeah, you throw an Albert Regis in there. He's been praised by coaches since spring. But I don't, like you're saying, I don't think that A&M might pay for that at some point in the year. But I don't think Notre Dame is the offensive line to make them pay for that, especially when you have a guy like Torian York manning the gaps in the middle of that defense. I just think that's not the O-line to do it. Maybe you'll see glimpses of it. Maybe it comes into play every now and then, but I don't see that as a glaring mismatch or a hole. What I do worry about is Howard Cross on one-on-one scenarios. If he gets on a one-on-one situation versus a Naboo or a Fayu, he might have the quickness over those two guys. I mean, he didn't have the quickness over a lot of interior offensive linemen, but, unproven guys, that one-on-one is something to look out for on the other side of the ball. I don't know why I just switched to the other side of the ball there. It's getting late, but yeah, I don't think this is the the offensive line to make them pay in that area.
Yeah, I'm also think like running a gap scheme benefits Le'Veon Moss a ton, right? Because in a zone scheme, right, you're moving that offensive line and you're asking a running back to make, lateral decisions very quickly, right? Whereas Le'Veon Moss is most effective when first of all, they ran more gaps. Like Jimbo was not like, he didn't neglect this fact. He ran more gap scheme with Le'Veon Moss than he did with Ruben Owens by significant. It was like Correct. 15% more, like significantly more, because Le'Veon Moss is better downhill. And that's what Colin Klein does like 60, 70% of the time, is he's going to actually have a hole that's going to open up for Le'Veon Moss. And it's like, okay, that is the hole that you are going to run through, and you're going to run down at, 18 miles per hour with these linebackers who, by the way, we like Jack Kaiser. He's a good football player, but maybe some other inexperience in the linebacker room, and I think it could be an interesting situation where if you find ways to get leverage on Howard Cross in those gap schemes, right, rather than try to overpower them or de-anchor them, him and Riley Mills, I think there's a chance that A&M could run the ball with Le'Veon Moss, and I don't think people are thinking about it. So
yeah, I think size-wise, the A&M offensive line matches up great against their lighter, quicker defensive line if you scheme it right. And yeah, you mentioned the linebacker room at Notre Dame. I think that linebacker room represents both their ceiling and floor of their defense, right? Yeah. It's going to make or break that defense. I mean, not make or break. It's going to be a top 10 at worst defense, most likely, given the schedule and everything they bring back. But, that linebacker group is going to determine their success in their biggest games, I think.
Yeah, and the secondary is really good, but Benjamin Morris coming off a shoulder injury. You're relying on 2 transfers, Rod Hurd and Jordan Clark, who you believe are really good football players, but I like their secondary, but I'm not ready to admit that it's. I don't know. I think it's going to be really good. I think it's going to be really good. It's not an advantage for A&M's wide receivers, that's for sure.
I do want to see at least one target to Benjamin Morrison with Noah Thomas. I want to see how it goes down. I want to see can he stop size? Can Benjamin Morris stop elite size with athleticism and catching ability? I mean, I know you're not going to do that play after play. It's not going to be the game plan to throw at Benjamin Morrison, but I'm interested to see it. Elko in his presser today talked about how they feel like they have a wide receiver one. You can only assume it's Noah Thomas. They're feeling really good about him. It was obvious in spring that they want to give him the most targets, get him in space, hand him the ball off in end arounds, get him involved in RPOs. Not necessarily to expect from what you look at as kind of like a red zone target, just like a big dude. They want to get him the ball in a lot of ways. And I want to see it happen versus the secondary. I want to see it get tested, at least in some capacity.
Yeah, I'll give my pick real quick. I'm gonna go A&M to win and obviously to cover as well. I think Wigman is going to have success against this secondary. I love the secondary. We did a whole video talking about best groups of college football back in the spring, and Notre Dame secondary was on the list. And because of those names you mentioned, but I love Wigman and what he can do in Colin Klein's offense and the receivers there. And please let me see some Moose Muhammad. Let me see some Moose Muhammad. Release that guy. Let him go. I hope, because I think he could be a difference maker. You mentioned Jordan Clark in the slot there. And listen, he kind of struggled last year at times. Good player. Good player, was hurt. But I do think that's where you can find your advantages, because you look at Rod Hurd, you look at Morrison, Watts is there as a ball hawking guy. Like, to me, I'm looking at those third and fourth receivers that you're going to get to, your third and fourth progressions potentially. And that's where you're going to get that. I think the advantage goes to A&M, and that's where you're going to see big time third down conversions, red zones, busted coverages in week one potentially. I do want to ask you guys real quick, who is under more pressure? Who needs to win this game more? Because obviously Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame, has lofty expectations in year 3, but there's a lot of expectations, I think, for Texas A&M, and also just the pressure and I guess more so pass pressure from what Jimbo's shortcomings happened, and I guess more so kind of trying to prove yourself on a national stage for Texas A&M. Obviously, it's week one game. These teams have plenty of opportunities to make up for this loss, and it's going to be obviously a very competitive football game. But who is under more pressure? Who needs this win more? Is it Mike Elko in year 1, or is it Notre Dame in year 3, Marcus Freeman?
Oh man, there's pressure on both sides for sure. But talk to Notre Dame fans. They expect playoff this year. And if they lose to A&M, that changes the whole outlook, because you lose a little bit of confidence. You're not feeling as good. You don't really have the mulligan, because 10-2 is a question mark without a conference championship. Depends on how the rest of the season would shake out. And of course, Notre Dame's going to get that brand bump, but they're on thin ice. And let's say they lose to an A&M in week 1. They run the table, and let's say they fall. Their last game of the year is at USC, right? They lose that game. I mean, that's a possible outcome. And that I don't know how that is viewed by the committee at the end of the season. I mean, they're kind of on the fringe right there. And this is year 3 for Marcus Freeman. Things seem to come together in year 3 for coaches at Notre Dame. Historically, they're feeling really, really good this year. And I think they're kind of having a computation error when they look at the line and they see that A&M is the favorite. Doesn't really jive with their expectations. So I would say more pressure on Notre Dame. Of course, it feels really bad for A&M to lose, because you have so much opportunity by winning game 1 this year. I mean, it just sets you off on such a good path under a new staff. It's just more of a opportunity loss for A&M than it is for Notre Dame kind of getting hit off their axis.
Yeah, I'll agree with everything you said right there. And the reason to beat a dead horse, I guess, just they got to win.
Yeah.
They got to win. There's significant pressure over there at Notre Dame. And but it looks like we're all in agreement that Texas A&M's going to win and cover. So
you're calling it too? Let's go.
Let's go. Come on, guys.
Oh
I mean, I just think Texas A&M matches up well. That's it. That's all.
I think so too. And just a couple more notes. You were mentioning this stuff earlier, Chris. Nickel. What was his name again? I'm sorry, I'm blanking.
Jordan Clark.
Jordan Clark. Is he coming off of injury as well?
So he was hurt. He played hurt last year at Arizona State. I think he should be healthy. It sounds like he's healthy, but he played injured, so he didn't look as good as maybe they thought he was going to be last year for them. And so his PFF grade and everything else didn't look great, but it was more so because he was hurt.
Should be healed up by now. But Howard Cross, coming off an offseason injury, limited participant in camp. Benjamin Morrison, also limited participant in camp. He had to ask, apparently, I think this came out in the Freeman presser today, he had to ask to do tackling drills. They were going to hold him out of every tackling drill, and he had to put himself out there and get himself to do it. that stuff helps A&M. Those are your top players. Those are your stars. That's why Notre Dame is rated as a playoff contender going into the year. Players like that, and also with Watts, great player. There's a reason he won the Nagurski last year, but he's a little bit susceptible to getting a little over aggressive at times. I think maybe Colin Klein can make him pay for that. We'll see what happens.